And welcome, boys and girls, to the very first episode of Door Stuck, a CSGO-based podcast talking about the week of Counter-Strike action. I am your host, Bach. With me today will be MagicHelmet, also known as Mitch Langford. Mitch, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, hey, glad to be here. It's been a while since we've been on the mic together. I think the last time we were was in Atlantic City, if I remember correctly. So it's been a while. Glad to be here, and I think we have a lot of fun topics to talk about today.
It definitely wasn't AC. It was one of the last MDL Global Challenges, the one in Texas. When Jay was there. Were you at that one? You were at that one.
Yeah.
With Henry G.
Yeah. With Henry G, yeah.
Yeah, that was a good time.
Afterwards, okay.
So that was actually that was my last event as a full-time staff member of ESEA on broadcast. I went to IEM Chicago, I think the weekend after that, but that was my last event as a staff member. Like I basically left and joined the beautiful people at Nerd Street right after that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we had planned on doing some sort of like goodbye picture or something nice for you because you had been with ESEA for so long, but for whatever reason it never happened. So I feel like at some point we need to do that for you.
Big sad.
I hope ESEA did something for you like after that. I'm sure they did, but either way, yeah. I mean, we've worked on a lot of events together, and I think this is a pretty cool concept that we're working on right now. So while all this kind of craziness is going on in the world, we can pump out a little bit of content. Give some fun content for everybody to check out.
So, speaking of content, looking at our very first topic for the show, ESL 1 in Rio de Janeiro has been postponed until November of this year, but the prize pool has been doubled. $2 million. That is insane. That is so much money.
Yeah, traditionally, I think they're normally $1 million, so doubling it, and that's the biggest prize pot I know of that's ever happened in CSGO. So whenever that comes around, whenever we're able to have these lands again, that is probably going to be the biggest event of all time for CSGO. So I'm really excited. Now, obviously, the Brazilians are going to be, a little upset they're not able to have this event that they were expecting to be a little bit sooner, but I think the wait's going to be worth it. The teams are really, really going to be going at it, especially considering how big that prize pool is. So it's definitely something to be excited about. It's tough that it's pushed back a little bit, but definitely going to be worth the wait in my mind.
Here's the concerning thing when you look at that major. The rules for Counter-Strike majors are very specific in regards to rosters. So if you qualified for a team, you can't change your roster until the major. That's the rule. But now there is a lot more time from when you qualified to the point of the major. So Valve really needs to look at their rules and say, is this even realistic? Because it does feel a bit unrealistic to expect a team to submit a roster 8 months in advance. Because that's what we're looking at. We're moving into the 11th month of the year. It's March currently. Teams already made it last month. Like, they've been waiting for this process to get going. In fact, I think the minors were supposed to be going on now. So, like, to me, I feel like Valve has to step in and kind of clarify that some of these rules are going to adapt. But touching upon your point of, the whole crowd thing, if you're a Brazilian, it's probably a bit of a bummer that you have to wait. But you now get the first and potentially only $2 million major that Valve has ever put on for Counter-Strike. Now, Valve, I know you're not listening, but in the off chance that you are, I hope that this proves that CSGO needs more prize pool for their majors. This is one of your most profitable and largest titles ever created. Give it some love. Even if you just gave us the double prize pool, $2 million. Teams will be happy with that, at least for the time being, until everyone else catches up. But follow suit. You're not the only people throwing events with that big of a prize pool. It's a lot of prestige now, for sure, but there are other $1 million prize pool events. So I would love to see Valve differentiate themselves from the crowd by introducing a little bit more cash, some more guap for the players, but also it creates more luster behind the event when there's that much money on the table up for grabs.
Yeah, and it really does change a lot. And the fact that they're going to be able to kind of test out the $2 million, the bump in the prize pool, that gives the fans a chance to kind of let everybody know that, like, we're going to be even more excited at the prize pools better. We're going to get more matches. The players are going to be more invested into it. They're going to be practicing more, scrimming more, and they're certainly going to have more invested into that tournament, considering how much money is going to be on the line. So, in my mind, Valve really has to change the rules. There's no way that teams are going to have to stick to the same roster for what I think you said, 8 months, 9 months. There has to be some sort of adjustment by Valve. Because I mean, you think of teams right now, how many teams actually last that long with the same roster? Like, you could probably count them on your hand. So, hopefully Valve takes a look at it, makes some sort of adjustment, makes the announcement. And hopefully it gives teams a little bit of leeway to work with right now, because that really is going to be difficult for teams to keep the same players on the roster. And they still have to work with, the leagues that they're already in, and they could be suffering. And one of them wouldn't want to make a change, but they can't, because there's $2 million prize pool at the end of the rainbow. So, there's a lot of decisions that have to be made, and Valve, I think, is the first person that has to address it.
I mean, it's not even just the prize pool. It's also the fact that, like, the second you make that change, you can't get that other player back. It's done. So now you've just thrown your spot away. Maybe you can get a coach to sub in and you get sticker money, but, like, realistically speaking, that is it. Like, it's done. And there's so much importance behind majors and major runs. Even the minors now have become important with the way that the process has changed. But speaking of rosters, that moves us into our second topic of the day. The heroic FPX, whatever you want to call it, sixth man roster move that has been made that has really shuffled up the Danish scene. So for those of you that are unfamiliar, Fun Plus Phoenix was orchestrating a buy for the team known as Heroic, a Danish team with the likes of Cadian and a few others.
And a new organization in CSGO, by the way.
Yes, this is an organization who has never had a team in Counter-Strike. So FPX wants to buy this team from Heroic. The team comes to the United States to compete in Flashpoint. Apparently, FPX bought into the league known as Flashpoint and was buying the roster from Heroic to compete under FPX, but the process wasn't finalized. It was a handshake deal. Unbeknownst to both FPX and Heroic, Esatag, one of the core members of the team, was approached by Astralis. Astralis was wanting to have a 6-man roster. That is what makes this so peculiar. This is the first time in CSGO that we've seen a team of this caliber bring in a 6th player. Not a sub, not a stand-in, a 6th permanent player potentially on the roster. Almost like what you see in titles like Overwatch, where you have players who juggle in depending on the map. As a result, Heroic and FPX saw the deal evaporate overnight. So the team that was supposed to go to FPX is now no longer going to FPX, and FPX holding the spot in Flashpoint meant that Heroic could not compete. So despite the fact that Esatag's contract didn't end until June, and he wasn't officially a part of Astralis until that point, they could not compete. It is very peculiar, and Cadian, as a result, and the rest of the team are back in Denmark. Now, Swole Patrol is coming in to compete in Flashpoint in their place. So the question I think that I have, what the hell? Like, why wouldn't you just let Heroic compete? It's so confusing. It makes no sense.
Yeah, and Flashpoint, I think a lot of the things that they were selling is that it's a pretty transparent league, and kind of how it operates. And I feel like there's got to be so much going on in the back channels right now about everything that's going on. I mean, you just listed it all off. It took you probably a full minute, maybe 2 minutes, just to describe this situation. I mean, you got 3 teams, 4 teams involved, 6 player going to Astralis, which I think is maybe the juiciest part of that story. The fact that they're bringing in an extra player, what's the thought process there? You have the best team in the world. You can debate that if you want, 1, 2, whatever. A really storied team that is bringing in a 6th man, and there's a couple of reasons why that could be. It could be because either they're thinking about getting rid of someone, they're considering travel that's really kind of wearing down on some of these players, so they might be able to rotate them out. So one of the players gets a vacation or a little bit of time off, while one of the the team goes off to one of these tournaments. So there's a few different things that could be going into that decision, but I really don't know what it is. I have a feeling it's probably the kind of the travel that goes along with it, the demands of the job. But either way, that's just an interesting change to the Astralis team. I certainly would have expected that. But it seems like they picked up a really good player on all accounts. I've heard Esatag's really solid. He was a standout player for the team for Heroic. And I expect big things from him. But how does he fit in, you know?
Yeah, I mean, he's been around in the Danish scene for long enough that you would expect to see something, you know, of this caliber come his way. It's not like he's a terrible player, but like just the timing and everything behind it, the lack of information, like you mentioned, there's supposed to be a lot of transparency. This is supposed to be a player-run league, and I'm not accusing anyone of anything. I'm merely saying, as a fan and a spectator of Counter-Strike, I am confused. And I have a little bit more of an understanding and a working knowledge of what goes on behind the scenes, being someone who's involved in it. Like I've talked to some of the talent before they actually went to go and do the current studio broadcasts for Flashpoint, and got a little bit more information from them. Not anything I would ever share with the public, just like kind of some questions I had, and they were able to answer them. So like I have a little bit more of an understanding and a working knowledge of how the back end systems work. But to me, it's still very, very confusing why you would basically say ta-ta to Heroic, a team that was perfectly fine competing when they had a different name, potentially, and then just bring in a team that's not signed to anybody, especially given the financial incentives of being a player in the league as a competitor. It's very confusing. I don't understand it. Which takes us to our next point, by the way, which is also very confusing. MIBR is now also competing in ESL Pro League. Now, to understand why that's so important and why that's also weird, Immortals, the company that owns MIBR, was a founding member of Flashpoint alongside Cloud9, whose shirt you are so lovingly wearing. I mean, you say that Astralis is
my cutoff, by the way.
Yeah,
he still owes me to that. We did that summer series in
in Denver.
And I think he didn't have a shirt for that day, and I let him borrow it, and he still has it. I'm still upset about it. I gotta be honest.
I mean, you say Astralis is the #1 team in the world, but when you wear a Cloud9 shirt, that instantly loses like 30 credibility points.
Come on, man.
But speaking of MIBR,
#1.
Speaking of MIBR, and speaking of Flashpoint and ESL Pro League, it makes matters really confusing because you would assume that MIBR would just be a team that was exclusively competing in Flashpoint, given that they were one of the groups that helped start it. Another in a string of very strange and peculiar ongoings in regards to Flashpoint. And again, not trash talking. I don't have hate for anyone at Flashpoint. I want to make that clear. It's just confusing.
Yeah, and I'm surprised we haven't heard too much about it from kind of the spokespeople for Flashpoint, you know, whether it's Monty, Thorin, or, you know, some of the talent, or maybe somebody on the PR team, to kind of clear it up a little bit, because I'm confused as well. And, you know, MIBR being in both leagues is a bit odd, and I don't really know why. I got the impression it was pretty much exclusive without actually calling it exclusive. So the fact that they have 2 spots, I mean, hey, it's great for MIBR, you know, congratulations. You have 2 Pro League spots. But yeah, I'm with you. It's a little bit odd. I'd like to hear it cleared up. And, you know, there could be a perfectly good explanation for it. You know, they just wanted to enable MIBR to be in another league. But, you know, I don't really have the answer to that. But I mean, just going back to the point of, you know, teams changing their rosters a little bit for the major. I mean, this is an example. It's just like a cluster of like, it's a bit of a mess with just that alone. So how can you expect teams to handle that for 8 months?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just it's interesting that they're able to go into the Pro League. But hey, it's great for MIBR.
Now that is going to take me into a little bit of a different segment. This is my pain in the ass moment of the week, presented by ZipChair. Yes, you heard me right. The pain in the ass moment of the week.
He said it.
Cadian deserves better. I know we already went into the points that happened with Astralis and FPX and Heroic, but Cadian is probably one of the nicest players you will ever meet. And I mean that sincerely. I really feel like he got screwed. Watching that video as he walked down the street in Southern California, literally with his shirt off. It was almost like symbolic that he
Like, they
wasn't
took his
repping
shirt
anyone, because he's like, am I on Heroic? Am I on FPX? Who am I? Where do I play? You could just feel the pain listening to him talk, and it was brutal. I honestly felt so bad for him, because I could tell he had been working so hard, and you even hear it in the video. He says, I have worked so hard. The team has worked so hard to get to this point. Everything was clicking. We felt like we finally hit that golden point. And then this all falls apart. He even says, we were ready to compete anyway, and they told us no. That, to me, is just like, why am I here? Like, I feel like I just wasted so much time. And I'm sure those thoughts went through Cadian's head. So, Cadian, I hope that you're keeping your head up and you guys find an alternate path, because the truth is, I do believe your positive attitude and good karma will be rewarded in the end. You're more than capable as a player. You've had your fair share of opportunities with rosters, but nothing ever really seemed to click perfectly. There's always one thing missing. And even if this was your opportunity to really prove that you are above what maybe someone might say about you on an analyst desk or your team, I still think there's a future there somewhere with you walking home with a big trophy. Now, Mitch, you have the antithesis to my pain in the ass moment of the week. What do you got?
Yeah, so I have the sweet moment of the week presented by Mike and Ike, and I'm going to be discussing Cloud9's kind of career trajectory and their rise from kind of watching them since they were 16, 17, or at least the NA players anyway. So basically, I know a few of these guys from local lands here in Chicago, namely OC and Ian, who's MOTM if you don't know. They showed up at this LAN that I was casting. It was like my first or second time casting, and there's these loud kids I wasn't familiar with, Ian being one of the loudest, as you can imagine, just yelling nice like crazy. And they ended up winning the tournament, and they beat some really good players. It was Dazzle and Shot Up, I think, on one of those teams. And I didn't know who they were, but they ended up winning the tournament. And, since then, I've been able to watch them continue to get better, and you can see the hard work that's gone into it. So now that they've gotten picked up by Cloud9, number one, that was awesome. I was so happy for them. Like, I don't know them all that well, but nonetheless, just seeing them kind of get co-signed by Cloud9, that was a really cool moment for me to watch. And since they've joined Cloud9, they've been really, really successful. I mean, I wrote out a couple of the results that they've had since they've been picked up. So they qualified for IEM Katowice, and I think that was within the first week they got picked up. They qualified for DreamHack Leipzig. They didn't do that well at Leipzig. They basically got beat by Renegades twice. But they qualified for the minor, and they went 6-0 in their maps for Flashpoint Season 1 so far. And, for me, it's just been really cool to watch all of those guys. They put in the hard work. And I didn't talk about Sonic and JT too much, but, I mean, they've been in the scene for a while. They came from South Africa, made it all the way to LA with Cloud9. And, it's just a really solid core of players. They have the coach as well. That's been fantastic, TC. And then they've added Mix as well as the analyst. From everything I've heard, they've done a great job. So just really proud of those guys. And, I expect nothing but good things here in the future.
Well, that is going to wrap things up for us here on Doorstock. We will be live every Friday around noon Eastern Standard Time. You can catch our videos, so make sure you guys like and subscribe if you enjoy the content, and we'll see you guys next time.